كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. So today, inshallah, we will continue with the remaining rulings of Iddah, the waiting period, where here the concept I'll explain first, inshallah, that will make things easier to understand, where if the woman has been divorced, if the wife has been divorced, a irrevocable divorce, and then she turns out to be pregnant afterwards, then what happens to this pregnancy? We'll talk about these rulings, inshallah. When will up until what time will the child that she gives birth to be attributed to her former husband? So all of these rulings, inshallah, we will talk about different scenarios in regards to this. And also, when a man marries a woman, then what's the minimum time period that needs to pass from the time of marriage till the time of giving birth for that child to then attribute to this new husband, right? Because there's a minimum time period as well. So we'll talk about that as well. In order to attribute the child to this new husband, there has to be at least some time period. So there'll be a maximum and a minimum time period of pregnancy we'll talk about. Then, after finishing these small rulings of Iddah, we'll move on to the kitab of Nafaqat, the chapter of expenditure over here. So first we'll talk about what expenditure actually is. And generally speaking, the husband is providing expenditure for his wife. So the concept of this I'll explain, inshallah. And when does it become necessary? For what reason is it necessary? And how much does he have to provide her? We'll go through that. When does he no longer have to provide her expenditure? We'll go through some rulings there. And then when the man divorces his wife, does he still have to provide her expenditure, including accommodation? We'll go through rulings there. Once he is passed away now, leaving behind his wife, is there any expenditure due on him from his estate? We'll talk about that. If the wife was the cause of separation, the nikah breaking, then will she be given any expenditure? We'll talk about that. Even in the case where the wife becomes ill, is she owed expenditure? Does the husband have to provide a servant for her? We'll talk about that as well. And lastly, he has to provide her accommodation. What does that mean? What does that accommodation look like? So we'll talk about that in a modern context as well, inshallah. So all of these rulings we'll cover today. When a man divorces his wife a man divorces his wife, a irrevocable divorce, then during the iddah he can still marry her, right? We already paid this before and it's come over here because obviously obviously the iddah is from him, so he can cancel her by marrying her, and obviously she consents to this. Now comes if it was the nasab, the lineage being established, so if it was a revocable divorce, so he revocably divorced her, and then what happens? She gives birth. If she gives birth exactly at 2 years or more, so this is going to be a few, rulings that are going to, subsequently follow on. Yeah. So just try to understand the ruling from the beginning and the concept, and inshallah, hopefully, the next rulings will be easy. So she was revocably divorced. This is important because in revocable divorce, then obviously during the iddah they can still sleep with one another. Remember that. So the idea here is that she gave birth at 2 years or more. Because remember, maximum period of pregnancy is 2 years. So even more later on, more than 2 years, as long as the wife doesn't confess to say that my iddat is over. Yeah? If she did not say my iddat is over, she didn't say anything like that, right? Then that lineage that she gave birth to, let's say 3 years later, 4 years later, she gave birth to a child, that child will be connected to the husband, right, that divorced her like 4 years ago. The reason is because obviously when he gave divorce, then because it was a revocable divorce, we'll assume that he must have, she had a long waiting period, and he prolonged, and during that waiting period it was still allowed for him to sleep with her, right? So he slept with her, and then 2 years later she's given birth. So the period has become so long because of that. So the idea simply is that during the waiting period he could have slept with her. That would have been a revocation anyway, and then she fell pregnant after that. So she didn't say that my iddat is over. She knows that her iddat didn't end because maybe because he's revoked her or something, right? So that's the idea through that mas'ala. Now the opposite ruling, if she gives birth within 2 years, the time he divorced her, and she gave birth within 2 years. So again, the child's lineage will be established to the husband, but this time the difference is that that birth will not mean that the husband revoked her. In the previous one, like I said to you, that he must have got her pregnant during the waiting period. That means he's revoked her. So that counted as a revocation, that birth that happened after 2 years, 2 years or more. So that birth counts as, he must have revoked her. But if she gave birth within 2 years, then that birth doesn't count as a revocation. It won't be a revoke, because it could have been that just before he divorced her, he got her pregnant, then he divorced her, then she was pregnant for a maximum of 2 years. So within that 2 years, she's given birth. So hopefully this is understood, that the point of this is simply to understand that birth doesn't indicate to him having revoked her. Then the mas'ala so that was regarding a revocable divorce. But if it was a irrevocable divorce, then what happens? Then only if she gives birth within 2 years, that lineage will establish. If she gives birth after 2 years, lineage cannot establish. Why? Because then in order to establish that lineage, we're going to have to say that the husband, after he divorced her, during waiting period, he slept with her, right? And that's haram. He can't do that. So we're going to end up making him do haram just because we're trying to save her from, in essence, haram, saying that you did zina, right? So clearly, if she gave birth after divorce, 2 years beyond 2 years, 2 years or beyond, 2 years or more, now we're going to have to assume that she must have done zina somewhere and she got pregnant, right? That's the only way. So then lineage can't establish to the husband because it was a irrevocable divorce. In the iddah period, he can't have slept with her. That's the idea. Obviously, if she gave birth within the 2 years, then we can assume that he must have got her pregnant before the divorce, and that's why within 2 years she's given birth. So this concept, hopefully, is understood. The whole idea behind this is to try to prevent the wife from having done haram. Obviously, if there's claims made now, this is like, provided there's no extra claims, yeah? If the husband now claims, that's not my child, then we go into li'an. If the wife says, this is not his child, no, then clearly she's saying that I committed zina, or there's all these other claims being made, then that's different ruling. The ruling becomes different. Here we're talking about purely the ruling based on what we've just said. It has to be as it is. The wife didn't even claim that my iddat is over or anything like that. Hopefully that's understood. Then, if the wife does claim that my iddat is over, so what happened? The husband divorced, and then after a while, whenever it was, 4 months, 5 months, 3 months, whatever it was, later, the wife claims my iddat is over, right? Then, if she gives birth within 6 months from that day when she confessed that my iddat is over, claimed that my iddat is over, she gave birth within 6 months. And remember we said minimum period of pregnancy is 6 months. So if she gave birth 4 months later from that date, or 5 months later from that date, we know definitely when she claimed that my iddat is over, she was pregnant at that time. She was actually pregnant. So when she told us that my iddat is over, she was lying. Because she can't have been. Her iddat can't have been over because she was pregnant. So now, that will be a lie, and that child will be attributed to the husband, because obviously, up until she said my iddat is over, 4 months or 5 months later she gave birth, it has to be 6 months pregnancy minimum. So therefore we will take it back to 6 months ago, and that 6 months ago will be during the iddah, and during iddah she is still firash for her husband, so her ex-husband, so therefore the child's lineage will establish from the husband, from that father. So that's what happens if she confesses to iddat being over, if she gives birth within 6 months. If she gives birth 6 months or more or later, she gave birth when 6 months or later now, then we can't be sure. If we take it back now, so let's say she gave birth 7 months later from the time she confessed to iddat being over, 7 months later. So when we take it back, minimum period of pregnancy is 6 months. When we take it back to this point. So at the time when she confessed to iddat being over, we can't be sure she was lying, right? So we're going to have to say you were truthful then. You must have got pregnant like a month later, and that's why 6 months later you've given birth, minimum period of pregnancy. So that's the concept here. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're talking about in this mas'ala. Now, for a woman who is a widow, so the same rulings will apply in essence, which is that if she was a widow, then she's got maximum 2 years, right? She's got 2 years from the time the husband dies, because we'll assume that the day he died, that day he must have got her pregnant, and then obviously that day he passed away on that very day. So then she must have been pregnant from then, and 2 years later, within 2 years she's given birth. If she gives birth 2 years or later, then you can't attribute that to the husband, because it can't have been that he got her pregnant, because he's passed away. Obviously he can't have come back alive and got her pregnant or something, right? So hopefully this is understood. Now, this is another concept here, that because the minimum period of pregnancy is 6 months, if a man marries a woman and within 6 months, like he married her and then 4 months later she gave birth, or 5 months later she gave birth, that child cannot be attributed to the husband now. Okay, that child cannot be attributed to the husband, because clearly she must have been pregnant before marriage. So if he got her pregnant, if he married her, if he married her and 6 months or later she gave birth, then that's fine. That will automatically attribute to the husband, right? The only time, if 4 months or 5 months, if he makes a claim that this is my child, I got her pregnant after marriage, then we can listen to that claim, provided that the medical side of things work out, meaning it makes sense. The doctors are even saying that there's a premature child, it's 5 month child, something like that. Then we can understand that is a claim substantiated by the doctors and medical science as well. So that's the minimum period of pregnancy, and we've talked about the maximum period of pregnancy, which is 2 years. You can check the Guinness Book of Records as well. There's something, if I remember correctly, like 17 months or something, if I remember correctly. There's a claim made that a woman was pregnant for that long. Google does give you a lesser time, but there's the actual Guinness Book of Records tells you a longer time. So you can see that 24 months is not something which is completely completely impossible or something, right? Then lastly, he covers a ruling where he says that if a man marries a woman who is pregnant because of zina, so the woman did zina and got pregnant, now she's pregnant, normally you can't marry a woman who's pregnant, but because she's pregnant from zina and that child is not thabitun nasab, is not established lineage, because the zani, the one who did zina, the man who did zina, doesn't get lineage, right? So he doesn't get that honor of being called the father here. So therefore that child is not established lineage. So that pregnancy is not established lineage. That's why the man can still, another man, meaning another man, can marry her, but he won't sleep with her while she's pregnant until she gives birth. So he won't sleep with her because obviously there's a hadith which he'll be violating. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فلا يسقين ماؤه زرع غيره, that his fluid, in essence his semen, should not irrigate the field of somebody else, meaning the womb. The field is like the womb where you plant your seed, right? So somebody has already planted their seed there, you can't then come there and plant your seed. You try to, in essence, plant the seed kind of thing, right? Because you can't do that anyway. But the point is that you can't have sexual intercourse with a woman who is already pregnant like this. So that's the idea from the hadith. So you don't want to violate that hadith, but because the hadith doesn't mention anything against marrying this woman, so that's why you're allowed to marry this woman. But this only applies when a woman is pregnant through zina, through adultery, because the lineage is not established from the husband. So therefore she will not be, we could say, firash for two men, right? She will only be firash for her new husband that she marries. The zani, the one who did zina with, she's not firash for him, so there's no gathering between two firash. Whereas if a woman who's pregnant from actual nikah and then she was divorced, right? So let's say then for her, because she is still firash for her ex-husband, because she's in iddah from her ex-husband until she gives birth. So if she marries another man, even if that man doesn't consummate that marriage with her, the problem is that she will become firash for this new husband as well as being firash for the ex-husband, because she's in iddah from him. So that's why there's going to be a gathering between two firashes, and that's not allowed. A woman can never be firash for two men at the same time. So hopefully this concept is understood. Now we move on to Kitabun Nafaqat. So the chapters of expenditure. So the husband has to provide expenditure for the wife, and this is the most, emphasized and the most important nafaqah that a man has to provide, which is for his wife, right? So he has to provide the nafaqah for his wife, meaning to the extent that even if his wife is, rich, really rich, she can be richer than him even, she can be a millionaire, right? He still has to provide her nafaqah, meaning nafaqah is, in essence, it tells us it's the food, the clothing and drink, ta'am, kiswa and sukna. So these three things is the basic nafaqah that the husband has to provide. Okay, beyond that, if he provides her, needs, in essence, then that's certain things that he can provide beyond that, which is obviously bonus. But whatever is considered within the hajatul asliya, meaning something which is part of a person's basic need, he will have to provide. But when he provides that, like we're going to talk about, according to her standard, according to the standard of both of them, should I say. So nafaqah is wajib, and that's after what we call the rukhsati. Once the nikah has been done and she has, in essence, come to the husband's home. Once she has come to the husband's home, now she's moved into the husband's home, then she is owed nafaqah from that point onwards. If nikah was done and she remained living with her parents still, not moved into the husband's home, even though the husband has provided her the ability, that facility to do so, so she chose not to do that yet, then she is not owed anything yet. No nafaqah is due upon the husband. The father will still carry on providing nafaqah. But once that, that handing over, in essence, she's now moved into the husband's home, that has been done, she will be owed nafaqah. So I explained already, nafaqah would include the clothing, the food, as well as the accommodation of hers. So that's the concept there. And in consideration of nafaqah, we consider both the states, meaning the state of the husband as well as the wife. So if the man was rich, got married to a poorer woman, then he will give nafaqah in accordance to like mid-range, right? If the other way around, if the poor man got married to a really rich woman, then again he's going to have to give nafaqah of mid-range. If he can't afford it, that doesn't matter. He's going to have to somehow make sure that he's going to give her that kind of nafaqah. So there's going to be a compromise in both. If they're both poor, then he gives nafaqah of the poor, and if they're both rich, he gives nafaqah of the rich, and if they're both middle class, then he gives nafaqah of the. So it's in accordance to what in their custom would be considered to be something which is of her needs. So he has to provide her needs, and hopefully that concept is quite clear and understood there. And the time when the wife prevents handing herself, she says that I'm not coming to your house, right? And she's gone off to her mum's house or her parents' house or somewhere else, and she is no longer coming to the husband's home. During that time, without the permission of the husband, in essence, right, that she is not owed any nafaqah. She doesn't have any nafaqah. So she is, in essence, what we call then nushuz. She is nashiza, she has come out of the obedience of the husband because she is not coming back home. She's done this without the husband's permission. If she goes with the husband's permission, then obviously she's getting nafaqah all the time, right? That's no problem. But if she goes without the husband's permission, she leaves the home, then during that time, she is not given a nafaqah because she's not, in essence, keeping to her part of the deal, so then he doesn't need to then provide the nafaqah. And when we talk about nafaqah, it will always be all of the three things that we talked about. Now, if she prevents from coming to the husband's home because of a right that she's owed, like for example, you owe me mahar, and you're not giving me mahar, and you said you will, so until you don't pay my mahar, I'm not coming. So if she does that, because she is withholding herself due to a right that she is owed in nikah, then she will continue to get her mahar because she is entitled to do this. Yes, so she has every right to do this. If that's provided, like the deal was already done, that he should have paid by this time, but he still hasn't paid. He's delaying, and obviously she can demand her mahar in this way. Obviously, it may not be the ideal thing to do if they obviously want to stay together, because this may create further problems, but this is what the fiqhi ruling is. Now, so we understood that as long as she is in the husband's home, she will always be given nafaqah. And then he mentions this ruling of if the man divorced his wife, then he will have to give her nafaqah during the iddah, right? So that's a fairly easy mas'ala we've already kind of prayed. And then he mentions that the widow will not get nafaqah, obviously because the husband's passed away, right? And whatever money he's left behind, any estate that is left behind will be the heirs. It won't be his. So that's that. Now, more interestingly, that if a separation occurs because of, meaning let's say the wife did a hurmatul musahara, right? So if the separation occurs because of the wife, or let's say the wife became apostate, and because of which the nikah ended, right? The nikah broke. So then what will happen? She will get no nafaqah because the separation occurred from her side because of her fault. So therefore, she will get no nafaqah during that iddah we're talking about, right? That's that ruling. Now, if the woman here, she was, let's say, she was taken into prison, she was imprisoned because of something that she did, her fault, right? She was imprisoned because of her fault now. Or let's say she was kidnapped by somebody, right? And that one doesn't have to be her fault, obviously. She was kidnapped. What will happen? Or let's say even to the extent that she went for Hajj, yeah, with her other mahram, with her father or with her brother or somebody else, right? Or with her son, and without the husband we're talking about here. So now what happened here, the concept here is that she is no longer with the husband in it during that period. So she's not with the husband. So she will got the husband doesn't owe her nafaqah for that period, the idea is. So if she was in prison, or because that was her fault, she was taken into prison, or even if she was in prison for not her fault, the point is that it's not the husband's fault, right? Yeah. So the idea here is, we should understand the concept, I think, here, which is that the nafaqah, what is it due for? According to us Hanafis, the nafaqah is in lieu of the ihtibas, as we call it, meaning we call it jaza'ul ihtibas. The nafaqah is owed to the wife because the wife is confined to the husband's home, in essence. The wife is confined to the husband. Right? So because the wife is confined to this husband and in essence his home, so he owes her nafaqah. It's anybody that is confined for your right, you owe them nafaqah. So let's say, for example, you were an employer employing somebody, right, for a duration of time. So this person is now confined to fulfill your rights for this period of time. That doesn't make him your slave, right? It's your employee. Right? It doesn't mean that there's your slave. It's no derogatory thing here. It's just that they are being confined to fulfill your right, meaning to do work for you. So for those amount of hours that they are confined to you, you owe them money. You owe them a pay. So that payment is going to be given to that person. So in a similar fashion here, the concept he understood that the wife is then confined to this husband, that obviously to fulfill the rights of this marriage. So because she is now confined to this husband, whereas the husband is not confined, right? Husband can go off and get married to a second or a third or a fourth. So he's not being confined, right? But the wife is confined to the husband's home as well as this marriage in essence. So therefore, nothing derogatory about this, nothing like she's become a slave or anything. The idea is she is fulfilling a certain rights. So because she is fulfilling rights, then now she needs to be looked after, right? So the husband is told, look after her, give her nafaqah. So that's the reason why we call this jaza'ul ihtibas. So now this ihtibas, if it's missing, if it is missing because of her fault, right? For example, like we said, she gets imprisoned, or she, like we said, she is kidnapped, for example, or it's not her fault or anything, but it's something that she needs to do, like she goes off on Hajj. So now the ihtibas is gone. She's gone without the husband. So now what happens? He doesn't owe her nafaqah anymore, because though it may not be her fault that the ihtibas is missing, but it's also not his fault, is it? It's not the husband's fault that the ihtibas is missing, so why should he have to pay her? So he doesn't have to pay her any nafaqah during that period. Now, if she fell pregnant because she went and done zina during the marriage, then during that pregnancy, he's not allowed to sleep with her. The husband is not allowed to sleep with her. So again, the concept of ihtibas is missing. Though physically she's still there, but he can't sleep with her. He can't take benefit from her. So that's why during that pregnancy, again, he doesn't owe her any nafaqah. So that is the concept of ihtibas missing. Now, the contrast to that is if she is ill, for example, while she's still in her husband's home, she's ill. She's just become ill. Or, for example, she's on a menstrual cycle. So in both of these times, he's unable to take benefit from her. But during this time, he still owes her nafaqah. Why? Because this is something, expected. It's expected that she will fall ill from time to time. And likewise, monthly, she will have her menstrual cycle. So because these are things which are expected, that's why she's not going to be penalized in essence for that. She will still continue to get nafaqah. But the other things which are, which aren't which are losing the because of which the ihtibas is missing, should we say, she will get no nafaqah during that. Now, if the husband travels with her, right, the husband travels with her, then he will still continue to give nafaqah to her, but the nafaqah he owes her is the nafaqah of residency, meaning the nafaqah whilst they were at home, that kind of nafaqah, whatever the nafaqah was, the amount that he owed her then, that's the same what he owes her now. Because the point is, when you go for journey, when you go on a trip somewhere, when you go on a safar, then the nafaqah becomes higher, right? You got a lot more expenditure, but he doesn't owe her that extra expenditure. Okay, he'll only owe that if he's obviously taking her with him. She doesn't want to go, then he'll obviously have to provide that. But if she's going on this journey as well, she wants to, and she's going on this journey, she's going to have to make sure that she's got all this extra expenditure for herself. So hopefully that is understood. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now we start off with today's session mentioning regarding the nafaqah of the wife. So we were talking about the nafaqah of the wife. So under this we next mention regarding the husband having to provide a khadim, you can say a servant, not a slave obviously, but a servant, somebody to serve the wife. That's if the husband is able to provide. The concept behind this ruling here is because it was customarily it was understood that the husband would provide a worker, a servant, whatever you call it, like in amongst the richer people, especially in the Western countries, you'll have a butler, you'll have a chef, you'll have a nanny, you'll have people that will, a gardener, these different people doing these different services. You'll have a cleaner. So in them times, they would have one person who at least would come round the house, would do, the cleaning, maybe wash the clothes, wash the dishes, go fetch some water. All of these things was done by this khadim. So it was very much well amongst the people that until today, obviously, in many countries, this is the case. Like, you have somebody. So the idea is that if the husband is from this kind of a custom, then he's going to have to provide this for his wife, if he's able to afford to do so, if he comes from this kind of a background. Now, obviously, if he does come from a background where these things are not provided, then he won't be necessary for him to provide if he can't afford so. So this is the ruling for this mas'ala. Then it does mention that if the husband was to say that, I'm not going to get you the person to serve you, and I will just do whatever it is for you. I'll do it. I'll do the cleaning. I'll do this. Then he can do that if he comes from that kind of a custom where the wife is not the one who does all of these kind of things. So he only has to provide the expenditure, or the wage, you can say, for that one khadim, one servant, not more than that. So he has to provide one servant if it comes from that kind of, like I said, background, that kind of societal custom where this is normal. Now, moving on to the next ruling, the famous ruling of, does the husband have to provide a separate accommodation? So again, here it's very much customary what's acceptable. So what he has to provide is at least a separate room which has a lock on it, and in that room she's able to have her amenities, her stuff there, her things there, her furniture, whatever it is that she needs, like her bed, like a cupboard or things like that. She can have all of those things if she needs those things. So this one separate room is needed to be provided by the husband so that the wife can feel safe, meaning her belongings can be safe. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, to summarize what we've done today, Alhamdulillah, we finished off the last few parts of the chapter of Iddah, where we discussed that when the man divorces his wife, if it's a revocable divorce, then as long as she does not confess to her iddah having finished, then indefinitely any child that she gives birth to can be attributed to her former husband, because she never ever confessed to her iddah finishing. But if she confessed to iddah finishing, from that date there'll be a maximum of 2 years, less than 2 years, where the child can still be attributed back to the former husband, because we'll assume, because it was a irrevocable divorce, he must have got her pregnant just before, the day that on the day that she confessed the iddah finished. So she thought her iddah finished, but it didn't, clearly because she was pregnant. So we can take it back to the time period of iddah. But if it was any time more than 2 years, then you can't take it back to that iddah. And if it was a irrevocable divorce, or if it was a widow, he passed away obviously, then we can't take it back to the iddah period. So she will get 2 years from the time he divorced her or from the time he passed away. So we can assume that the day he passed away, he got her pregnant, or the day he irrevocably divorced her, he got her pregnant. So from that day, she gets 2 years maximum period of pregnancy, which is 2 years. And then we can attribute the child back to the husband. So that the reason we do all of this is so that the child can get a lineage. So all of that is understood in a nutshell. Then we went through the rulings of nafaqat. We talked about that the husband has to give his wife nafaqa, expenditure. What does that expenditure entail? Food, clothing, shelter. In essence, he has to give her the basics, the essentials. Anything that you would consider essential will have to be provided for her. So that's the basic where we're saying. But obviously, if she comes from a household where, as we prayed later, if she comes from a household where it's normal for them to have a servant, then he would have to provide that too. So it's, in essence, any customary norm that would be expected for him to have provided her is essential, then that would be then provided. That would be essential. So if she comes from a custom where everyone drives, everyone has a car, then she would have to be provided a car, for example. If she comes from a custom where everyone has a phone, mobile phone, then she would have to be provided the mobile phone. Like this, essentials basically. If she comes from a country where not everyone has a phone, then that won't fall under essentials. So it's essentials, in essence, that he is providing her from, in essence, the background. The same thing she provides him. The concept, hopefully, that will, in essence, give us the whole concept of nafaqah. So that's where the concept of the housing comes in as well, as we prayed, that what is expected according to the custom he has to provide. So that's what in essence the nafaqah, all of that is to do with. And when he provides this is after she has moved in with him. So after she's moved in with him, in essence, we prayed the concept that the nafaqah is jaza'ul ihtibas, meaning she gets this payment of nafaqah due to being confined to him, confined to his home, in essence, because of having to fulfill his right. So as long as that is there, meaning the ihtibas, the confinement is there, then she will be given nafaqah. But if the confinement is not there, for example, she leaves without his permission, then for that period that she left for, she would not get nafaqah from him. So hopefully this explains all the rulings in regards to nafaqah that we prayed so far.